Now, Tyler is our new CEO. He's been on board with the company a little over a year and has been CEO for about 6 months now. Tyler's a 20-year veteran of technology companies in various leadership and executive management roles. He has been called a smoke jumper, as he is typically sent into divisions and areas that have historically underperformed, and he uses his engaging style to create a lot of momentum, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of growth. So with that, please welcome Tyler Beecher.
Hide my alcohol right here. That's a joke. By the way, did anybody hear Joe Theismann just scream break a leg at me? Did you hear that? So this conference is a success already for me because I woke up this morning and my phone rang and it was a 703 area code, and I answered the phone. It was Joe Theismann. And he asked me just a basic, quick logistical question, but I just want you to know, Joe, I will never take advantage of that phone number or use it inappropriately. I want a public commitment that I'll only call you for planning family vacations and things. So really pleased to have him here. So I wanted to do a quick why me at Trace3. I met with a couple of great leaders before coming here, people that I look up to, people that I come to try to do my homework with. And what I heard was, hey, Tyler, we hear you speak about a lot of stuff, but we'd really like to know why you at Trace3. Why did you make the decision? Josh mentioned I'd been with Fortune 500 manufacturers for 20 years. I started my career at 3Com, then to Cisco, EMC, 11 years at Network Appliance or NetApp. But I wanted to just take a little bit of time and talk about Trace3. And this isn't why Trace3 today. This is why I came to Trace3. So it's a little bit of a look back. So number one, I believe that Trace3 has a nose for technology unlike anybody in the industry. And when I was on the manufacturing side of the fence, what I would see was their nose for talent, emerging technology, and for talented people was second to none. And by the way, I believe that Silicon Valley and the money in Silicon Valley agrees with us. And that's why we have this amazing briefing program that we do. I love the mentality that everyone at Trace3 is focused on customer service and customers. Didn't matter, in my past lives when I would interact with Trace3, and I became really kind of acquainted with Trace3 in about 2005 and really started to work with Trace3 in 2007. It didn't matter who I was working with at Trace3. If I was talking to someone in contracts or legal or marketing, whoever it was, they were focused on customer outcomes, right? So I love that mentality of everyone in sales. Best of the best engineering. A constant push for evolution. And by the way, I love this conference. One of the things that really impressed me and candidly took me back a little bit when I first came to know Trace3 was this idea of writing a playbook, right? I mean, I think we all write playbooks. We have kind of a private playbook, and maybe sometimes we show a little bit of it to the world. But the idea that Trace3 was so bold as to call their shot, to call backboard and say, hey, here's what we're doing this year. And by the way, to send it out to the world, to send it out to everybody in the ecosystem and say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. I actually witnessed a number of times when I was working on, again, as a manufacturer, I witnessed those playbooks showing up at competitors to Trace3, and it was interesting to watch it play out. What you would see is, first they'd kind of scoff and maybe make a joke like, hey, did you see we have their playbook, right? And by the way, listen to this guy. He thinks he's gonna do this, right? And they would kind of joke and scoff, and then, maybe over the course of a couple of weeks, as I touch base with these guys, they'd come back and say, hey, do you know some guys over there? Maybe you could put in a word for me? And it was interesting that by sharing Trace3's juice, people were really attracted to that message. They were attracted to the transparency. Innovation, you're going to hear a lot about this week, but it was just last fall that I attended our first table group meeting. And table group's something we're going to talk about. Table group's who we use to facilitate our organizational health play, which we believe in a big, big way. But I attended our first table group, And we set as a goal that we would be the epicenter of innovation. And by the way, again, going back to this is a look back at Trace3 and why I admired Trace3 When in the past, when I would look at Trace3, right, I could see that they were placing big bets. And I was watching the competition put money in their pockets and start to kind of trail off, maybe become lifestyle type partners, really starting to say, hey, maybe things are winding down. You know, we've done okay, we're backing off. The thing that I noticed, and I think you've all read if you've paid attention to the plays and the playbooks, is you've seen that Trace3 was always doubling down on the bet. Trace3 was always taking whatever came in and investing it in the future. So, again, went to my first table group in November. We held this show last year, so January of 2014, and some really smart Cisco executives were in the audience, and within a couple of months, we're at the Cisco Global Partner Summit, and we're called up on stage. And this is after a day of, John Chambers and some of his lieutenants up speaking about, innovation and outcomes. We're called up on stage, and we received the award as their National Partner of the Year for Innovation. So I guess my point is, I was really impressed to watch the investment in innovation, to watch Trace3 call the shot at the table group, to watch us put on this show last year, and watch some really bright executives, the biggest player in the industry, get it, and then give us that award. And there's a lot to be said about that. So don't want to spend too much time on it. Believe it or not, I had never seen the movie Jerry Maguire until about 6 months ago. I'd seen pieces and parts. I'd seen half of it on a plane here and half of it on a plane there, but I'm always distracted and doing stuff. And I'd never seen the movie. I'm a bit of an insomniac, and so one night, and part of my issue with insomnia is I like to go to sleep with a laptop on my legs. So I'm sitting there with my laptop, kind of knocking off some last-minute emails. Up comes this movie, Jerry Maguire, on one of the cable stations. Cable, that dates me. But basically, I'm watching this movie, and I kind of fall in love with this character. I didn't fall in love so much with the movie, but I fell in love with the character. You guys all remember, there's a lot of great one-liners, right? Show me the money, right? Help me, help you. There's some really soft, lovey stuff that I really get. You complete me, just how I feel when I'm with Josh. But sorry, Josh. But my point of the story was I fell in love with the character because here was a guy, right? If you remember the opening scene, here's a guy who kind of has this breakdown. He kind of has this epiphany that what he's doing, he has a crisis. He realizes what he's done with his life and what he's doing with his life, it doesn't feel right, right? And so he's up in the middle of the night. He has this epiphany, and so he starts to write. And he just writes and writes and writes. And if you remember, he ends up over at Kinko's or someplace, and he prints off a bunch of copies of this manifesto that he's written. And he goes down, and he's in the moment. He's in state. He's really pumped up. And so he sticks one in the mailbox, or he has the hotel stick one in the mailbox of every room that's there for the conference that he's attending so that everyone in his company gets this thing. And then the sun comes up, and he realizes, what have I done, right? By the way, does anybody remember the name of the manifesto that he wrote? I think it was The Things We Think But Do Not Say. And by the way, that is what I believe our playbook is. That was one of the things that was really cool about Trace3 to me was Trace3 put on paper, this is what we're going to do. And by the way, if you met with our founder, you know that he says what he means and he means what he says. Some of you have had very interesting interactions with him over the years, right? But that is who we are, and that is Brendan with Trace3. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me in I guess a quick story from my youth. And I know some of you are sitting there saying, please, Tyler, tell us a story about high school. But I was a part of a high school wrestling team that was actually a very, very good team, right? We were in the 5A division. It was the biggest division in our state. And my senior year, I found myself a middleweight on this team. And this was a team, again, that contended for a championship every single year. Hands down, we either won it or we were first or second every year. But great team. Again, I'm a senior. And the interesting thing was I was a bit of an anomaly. I grew up playing basketball, and I really liked it. But, my freshman year, I had some coaches convince me that I was not going to make the NBA. And I had a father that was a little bit of a psycho, really liked fighting, and I had 4 other brothers, and it was just kind of a natural. So when my football coaches who were also the wrestling coaches, were, hey, this is what you're going to do, it's what I did. And I went to a strange school. And again, the school was a little bit of an anomaly as well. So to give you an idea, for wrestling matches, we would have double the crowd that we would for, say, basketball, which is really strange. It's kind of the reverse elsewhere. If we were on an away meet, right, we would take, of the 12 cheerleaders, we'd take 8 with us. Basketball would keep 4. I mean, it was just kind of strange. This school was really psychotic about wrestling. So, and by the way, to just kind of add on to it, if you came to a home wrestling meet, I mean, it was quite a scene. They would turn out the lights, right? I mean, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face other than kind of a dim light where you came through the door. And then they would turn on this big dome light, so you could only see 2 scrappers in the middle. That's all you could see. And then for big meets, right, to make it even more interesting, as you came out, they would crank a song that you liked. I mean, it was almost like going to a Major League Baseball game when you see the batter come out. They're like, now up, Tyler Beecher. And like, I was kind of a punk at the time, so I would crank tunes that I shouldn't, but to make my mother proud, I would stick to things like just AC/DC, and I'd always come out to Back in Black, or I'd come out to Thunderstruck was one of my favorites. But you get my point. We thought we were pretty cool. So as I entered my senior year, I had been injured as a sophomore, and I had been injured as a junior. So I entered my senior year, nobody really knew me. So season kicks off, and I just go on a tear. I mean, literally, match after match, I am just murdering people because I was part of a good team, but nobody knew me. Nobody saw me coming. So I make it to my first big tournament of the year, and again, nobody knows who I am because I don't have a past record. And so I start off, and I beat the first opponent, I beat the second opponent. Well, the next guy's a state champ. And so, and I just, you know, somehow I just mangle this kid, right? I mean, I really took care of things. And I make it on to the next guy. And now this guy is an undefeated wrestler in high school. This is a 3-time state champ. He, of course, is going to win his 4th because who's going to stand in his way? And so the guy doesn't see me coming, and I just absolutely harvest this kid. I mean, I rough him up good in front of his family and his friends and his sweet crying mother. But my point was, I was riding really high. I was feeling really good. This was a big tournament, by the way. It was a multi-state tournament. It was the best kids from the best schools coming in from out of state. And so I went into Christmas break feeling really good about myself. In fact, coming home from that tournament, my face was on the sports page. And I really started to get a pretty big head. In fact, one of my coaches nicknamed me Giant Killer, and he would take pictures, like, he basically would take the paper and he'd stick it up all over school, and he just had my face, Giant Killer. By the way, that is not me. We've sanitized this for this audience. But basically my name, my name and face were all over school, and people started saying, hey, Giant Killer, this guy's a machine, right? And so, as luck would have it, right, we had the holiday break, a lot of hype, a lot of extra practices because there's no time, right, or no school, so got a lot of extra time to do it. And my coaches really started to pump me up about a tournament that was about 3 weeks out. And this tournament was the big one, right? 6 states coming together, the best of the best. And my coaches started to notify me, hey, just so happens, there's a guy in your weight class, future Olympian, undefeated, again, similar to the past kid, 3-time state champ. He'll never see you coming, right? You've got your next target in your sights. Let's go take this guy down. I was pumped, right? I mean, I was really buying into this Giant Killer thing. So the weeks pass. We ratchet up the intensity, right? I'm ready for this kid, right? I mean, we go out of state. We show up. Like, I am a man on a mission. I don't know if everybody remembers the old Sony Walkman, the yellow one with the strap or the sports, right? But, like, you couldn't pull me away from it because I was just in the zone, right? So we get there, day 1, 3 matches, and I just blow through them quick and clean, done. Day 2, got the semis in the morning, and then I've got this future Olympian that evening, right? So I show up that morning to the gym. Again, great day 1, blew through everybody. Show up that morning to the gymnasium, and again, got AC/DC again cranking in the headphones. I'm making my way across the gymnasium. Big high school event, so it's all the different groups sitting in their colors. So I spot our colors off the way, and so I start to make my way over across the gym, and I can see my parents. So I make my way over, I see my parents, and as I get closer, I'm like, well, hey, there's an uncle I haven't seen in a long time, and then there's an aunt, and then there's a few cousins that I hadn't seen in a number of years. I'm like, this is really strange. And then I noticed a few guys from my dad's office. I'm like, wow, we're out of state. This is quite a haul for these people to make it. And then more shocking or surprising was I noticed my sweet grandmother up behind my parents. My grandmother hates wrestling, right? So I'm like, wow, Grandma made the trip. This is pretty amazing. So I made my way over. I get to my dad, and I said, hey, what's going on? Why are all these people here? He says, hey, buddy, you're the Giant Killer. They're here for the big show tonight. Everybody's here to see you tonight, right? It's going down. So I was even more pumped. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I got to get this semifinal match over. In my mind, get it done quick, get it done clean, surgical, get out of there, get back to the hotel, rest up for 6-7 hours, get ready for the big show. So, as luck would have it, my name comes over the PA as I'm talking to my dad. They call my mat number. There's multiple mats working, like multiple fights. And so I make my way over. I don't even look at the bracket. I don't even pay attention to the next guy up because he doesn't matter. I'm just going to smoke through this kid, get to the night. And so make my way over to the mat. Ref calls me in, chin straps on, shake hands. All I really notice is this guy's wearing a yellow jersey, yellow singlet, right? So set up, ref blows the whistle, and apparently everybody in that gym got the memo that I was going to fight the big one tonight except for that kid, right? That kid was unaware that I had the big fight that night. So within a split second, fingers gouged to the eyes, headbutt. I mean, it was literally like I was blurred. I had a bloody nose. It was like I'd stuffed my head in a wood chipper. And this kid is all over me. And in my mind, I'm like, who is this kid? Does he not know who I am? Does he not know the mission I'm on? Like, what's this guy doing, right? He's not going to plan here. So this guy lynches in on me. We start to tumble across the mat. And I mean, we're end over end Cobra on Mongoose type style here. And I was always a pretty good tumbler, and I was always pretty comfortable because I always thought, you know what, I'm going to come up right side up, and I always had. I always just thought, yeah, this thing's going to end right for me. So pretty comfortable. I just let it happen. Well, as luck would have it, I'm end over end, and you probably can guess the rest of the story, which is I just feel all of a sudden this tussle come to an abrupt halt. I feel my legs jam behind my ears, which is pretty uncomfortable, and I mean, candidly, I've told this story to a couple of folks here, but literally, I'm in this contorted position where my spine is bent, my face is jammed in my crotch, and all I can see literally is my crotch, the lights, and I can hear the muffled cries of my grandmother, right? and so, you know, in my mind, I'm like, man, this is not going well. And within a few seconds, right, I hear a slap of the mat, the whistle blows, and I've lost by fall. I've been pinned, right? So, and just to kind of put this thing in perspective, I'd never been pinned. I'd never been close to a fall. I don't think I'd ever had my back exposed, candidly. But, you know, here in this moment, I not only had lost, I had lost in front of God and country and family and my crying grandmother and everybody. I had lost in 30 seconds. I had lost by a pin. But I not only lost by pin, I lost by a move called a spladle. Sorry, it didn't come up right. So again, this has also been sanitized for this meeting. My spladle was much worse than this. But we used to joke, by the way, just to give a little background, we used to joke like, what's this move, the spladle? How could you even get spladled? It would be like a ninja would have to sneak in the night and somehow get you in this weird position, right, to do this thing. But we didn't even really think it was possible. And again, there I was. I had lost in record time to a kid that I didn't know, and I had been spladled. I mean, this kid truly harvested my soul in front of everyone. I mean, it was like I was done. In fact, in my 17-year-old mind, if you'd asked me, hey, Tyler, would you rather suffer public execution or a spladle, I would have taken the noose. I'd have just said, yep, that gets over quick. This thing you can never escape, right? So what's my point to this story? And by the way, thank you for indulging me. What's my point? Is it, if you really think about, you know, lessons learned at 17, is it, hey, never look past an opponent? It could be. Is it, you know, stay in the moment, stay focused, stay present? It could be. Is it wear clean underwear? You know, I always did, luckily. But there's a lot of lessons to be learned. But the one that I really took away from this thing was I had very quickly, I mean very quickly, in a matter of months, bought into my own hype. I mean, just a few months earlier, I was this scrapper with the bruises to show it. Nobody knew me. I was this underdog. I was crushing people. And literally in a matter of 3 or 4 months, I thought I was the man. I thought I was the guy to beat. And I forgot who I was, and I forgot how I had gotten there. And by the way, my coaches had as well. You know, it's amazing how quickly you can surround yourself with people, if they're not the right people, that will tell you, hey, you're the man, you're doing great. You know, let's just get set up for tonight. And along come a guy and you get spladled. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the spladle further on. But I wanted to talk about what I believe your position is in the market today I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I was digging for a throne because some of you have heard me talk in the past about this idea that IT is being pushed very quickly to prominence. I've said in the past, I believe if you haven't already, a lot of you have, but if you haven't already, you as the top technology leader in a business, you are being thrust to the table because technology is where it's at. I talked a little bit about Cisco's Partner Summit and listening to John Chambers speak, and one of the things that John said, he again spoke very eloquently about a number of customers, but he cited the giants of the industry that used to see themselves in a business segment that now see themselves as a technology player that stands up and brings down lines. In fact, I think he cited Walmart as a great example where he said, look at Walmart, here's the biggest retailer in the world who saw themselves as using technology and having a technology department that they utilize, whereas today they see themselves as a technology company, the complete flip, that stands up and tears down business lines based on what the technology tells them, based on what the data tells them. So the change is on, and I actually believe that you not only are being thrust to the table, I actually believe you're being thrust to the throne. Why is that? I believe this is the answer. I spent a little time with a CIO that I admire greatly the last couple of weeks. Neil Nicolaisen, by the way, you're going to hear him tomorrow. But I asked, and I did this with a couple of folks, but I asked Neil some questions about this and why, whether or not my position or my belief was true. And one of the comments that he made during our conversation was that all possibilities today come from technology. And I really tried to vet that. I really tried to think about that and say, hey, is that true, right? And we started to go back and forth. And if you really think about it, what came out of the conversation was you have to think all the way back to lean manufacturing on the business or the process side to come up with something that was really a game changer. Almost everything else, to be candidly, everything else that I could think of, right, that has really been a needle mover or a game changer for people, it's all been technology-based, or technology-based, and the pace is heightening, right? It's getting quicker and quicker. So what does that mean for you, right? What it means is that I believe, and by the way, I used to get really cute with some of you and I'd say, well, does CIO mean you're the chief information officer? Or does it mean you're the chief infrastructure officer? Does it mean you're the chief innovation officer? What does it mean? But I actually believe this is the way things are headed. We are headed to where you really are the chief possibilities officer. You are the only person in the room that can really say what is possible, right? People can think up a lot of things. When you think about an executive boardroom and a bunch of people that are polished and have big resumes and they're very skilled in pontificating and debate and conjecture, but really at the end of the day, they all have philosophy or opinions, right? They all have stories, but there's one person in that room that can say, love the opinion, appreciate the story, love the political stance on that. Now, can I tell you what the data says we should do? Can I tell you where we should invest? Can I tell you where we should divest? Can I tell you where we should pull back? Can I talk to you about what customers are really saying about us? Do you want to know what our employees really think? I mean, one thing holds true, right? Most people have been taught in their lifetime to go along to get along, right? Doesn't mean they're malicious, but the truth is sometimes a very hard thing to find. I might be work for the one rare company where if I bomb up here and I go out to the punch bowl, people will tell me I actually bombed. But in past lives, if I'm up here and I bomb, as soon as I get out that door, they're going to, hey, great job, way to go, fantastic, love ya. By the way, that was my favorite part of Jerry Maguire. When I talk about Jerry Maguire, he wakes up, he has the epiphany, and he's like, he writes what he writes, and then does his thing, puts the manifesto in the mail slots, and he comes down in the morning. Does anybody remember what happens in the morning when he comes down? Everybody from his organization is standing in the lobby. They're all waiting to go, and they all start to applause, their applause, and they start to cheer. And there's two guys over leaning up against the wall, and they're like, great job, Jerry, way to go. And then one leans over to the other one and says what? Says, how long do you give him? 2 weeks. He's out. The truth is tough. Truth up against power is tough. So my point there is I believe, right, IT rules the day. I don't believe any longer that it is, hey, it's a seat at the table. It is the seat at the table. Because everybody else is looking at you to see what's possible. Neil's going to talk to a little later tomorrow about speed is the new currency. But I believe that wholeheartedly. That's what they want to know. Hey, can I do this? Is this viable? Is this plausible? And by the way, we all have to make that choice. Do we want to step up and be proactive about that, or do we want to be reactive about it? I've got a good friend who's a VP of IT for a very large, Fortune 500 shop. And I visited this guy about a month ago, and I see this guy about every 6 months. I don't see him that regularly, but he seemed very cast down. He just seemed like he was kind of distraught. So I started asking what was going on. He said, well, this year's going to be tough. They've pulled a lot of my budget. So I started asking the basic questions you always ask, questions my mother would ask at the dinner. Where'd your budget go, right? And so I think he's going to give the answer, well, we're outsourcing this, we're pushing that. And the guy says, you know what, Tyler, I've been so busy doing my day job that I really haven't had a chance to show these guys a vision of what they can do with technology or what we can do with technology. And they've hired this new chief marketing technical officer, and he's got all my budget. He literally has been given the task to take my budget and go out and spend a lot of money on technology to show the business how to acquire new customers, how to go into new markets, right? How to grow. My job now, I'm relegated to internal architecture and plumbing. Right? My job is, hey, keep the lights on, keep the network up, do the stuff that I think a lot of you would just see as table stakes. Keep email up, right? That's my job. This guy's doing this. This guy now is leading the business. This guy, you could argue now, really is the chief possibilities officer, this CMTO, right? Because he's showing the business what's possible with technology. So this brings on the leadership question, which is, how will you lead? Because I believe, again, it's from here on out, it's the big chair. It's the where are we going to go? Where should this business go? If you leave it up to executives, if you leave it up to suits, if you go conventional, the data shows us you're going to get hurt. So I want to just run through it. Some of this is old hat, and some of it's just things that I've pulled off of a lot of you in this room, candidly, over the years. But I just wanted to share what I think are some best practices. First off, I believe leaders show us what's possible. What I mean by that is they show us what can be. The guy who can do that or the gal that can do that will trump whoever's keeping the lights on. Leaders help us embrace change, right? They help us understand volatility. They help us understand complexity, right? They help us move through the fog. Leaders make sure that we're on the right track, right? There's a lot of managers in every business that make sure that we're doing things right, but who's truly going to make sure that the business is on the right track and doing the right things? That is the job of the leader, and again, I just don't believe anyone has the visibility that the core technology guys do in any business to really show where things are headed. Leaders inspire us to change. One of the taglines that I like about leadership is a leader is someone who pushes us to do the things we don't want to do so we can achieve the things that we want to achieve. And you are sorely needed in your businesses because there are a lot of things that have to be done, and no one is pushing the way that they need to really change and evolve those businesses to be what they need to be. Leaders help us focus on what's important and why it's important. I've talked about this in the past, and I get really passionate about it, but because of the rate of change today, because of what technology has done over the past 15 or 20 years, the rate of change is too fast for the old school, command and control leader. So those leaders that are really into showing you how to do your job, right, they simply have become bottlenecks, right? If an organization can only move as fast as one person can understand things, you are going to get left in the dust. So leaders have to get really good at laying out what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then they need to empower people to deliver on the how. And then lastly, right, leaders let people create, right? I'll tell you, this has been a challenge for me, and I pop off and I talk a lot about, hey, with my own teams, here's my intent, here's my intention, this is what I'm going for. Does everybody understand what we're going for? And by the way, I love to play Stump the Chump and, let's test Tyler. And so I like to ask, hey, tell me what my intentions are. Is everybody clear on what we're trying to do with my immediate team? And one of the things that's interesting, I've had a number of breakdowns where I've come back from a trip where I've just been communications down and I'm on a plane and out of pocket, and I'll come back and talk to someone, and this happens, in my current life, it's happened in my past life, it happens in my personal life, where I find out I'm actually not that great on pitching income or outcomes myself, because I may come back and someone will say, hey man, we've all been waiting for 10 hours to know what to do. We don't know how you want to do this. And my question is, well, what was our intent? What were we going for? What was the outcome? Because you really should have the ability to make those decisions. But as a leader, if you haven't laid that out right, you're a bottleneck. You've stymied the organization. Great leaders, and by the way, this is interesting to me because we live in the age of Twitter, we live in the age of Instagram, and a lot of people, I think, want to see themselves almost as a cult leader. Like, hey, look how many followers I have. But really, that's not what leadership's about. Leadership is about creating independence. It's about getting people that can stand on their own, right? Creating more leaders. Leaders bring resources to the fight. And what I mean by that is, in every business, there are people that are assigned, right? They're part of your team. They're paid to do the right thing, but there are also a tremendous number of resources. I've yet to find a company or organization where there were not a tremendous number of resources that were available if people thought you were doing something special, right? I used to kind of hound certain teams that would support certain customers, and some of these guys, I would go so far as I'd either put a picture of a barbecue up in their cubicles or in their offices, or I would put a picture of a bin fire up in their cubicles or in their offices. And what I was trying to remind them was, hey, you know what? Your smoke really matters, right? If you act like something's going to be successful and you're putting off smoke, I mean, we've all had that experience where you're in your backyard or you're someplace and you get that whiff of a good barbecue and you go, hey, what's going on over there, right? You're interested in it. The same is true if you get a really bad smell. You're like, man, I don't think I want to go over there because it smells like they're, burning. You've all seen the bin fire, right? So my point with that is, if you really think about what makes people successful, it's an ability to create a coalition. I love the quote, right? Victory has 1,000 fathers while failure's an orphan, or we say success has 1,000 fathers while failure's an orphan. A lot of people think that's a post-game thought. Like, well, yeah, you know what? We completed this big project in record time. We did great. Now everybody's showing up to lift the trophy with us and say, hey, I was there when we sketched that out on a napkin over at the XYZ bar. And, yeah, I was there day one, heavy lifter right here, And so we've all experienced that. But my question is that is kind of the post-game play. But why isn't that more of a pre-game thought in more organizations? How do we create, excitement around what we're doing and attract resources that are hiding in the weeds? I promise you, no matter what your role, if you're in this room as a customer, a partner, if you're in this room as an employee, right, if you really think about, hey, am I attracting the right resources to what I'm doing, there's something for us all to check there. I'm a huge believer that leaders are there at the right time. And I actually believe that this is super simple. I mean, I know I'm not covering anything that is earth-shaking to anybody, but I think these are really good reminders because I think most businesses actually get this wrong. In fact, I think most families get this wrong. I think most of us get this wrong in relationships. Most of us hug on people when things are going really good. Hey, you just won something. Great. Hey, great job. Way to go. Hey, you're on top of the podium. Hey, way to go, man. High five, right? We're really there for winners. Hey, way to go. Great year. Incredible. Man, did that project in record time. Really amazing. But the people that really understand how the ROI works with people, they're the people that invest with people while those people are struggling, right? We've had Tom Mendoza speak at a number of these, and from a cultural standpoint, I am a huge disciple or believer in Tom Mendoza. And, I worked for Tom for about 11 years, or in organizations that Tom was running. And one of the things that was interesting, and a lot of you have experienced this, is if you called Tom and said, and by the way, he would always offer to do this, but if you called Tom and said, hey, we had some guys that worked really hard and they did a really good thing and they just won something, or they just finished something in record time, or they really just did an amazing thing for a customer, he was always happy to pick up the phone and talk to those people and congratulate them. But the thing that was always impressive for me with Tom was much more interested in, hey, yeah, I'll absolutely make that call, but can you tell me real quick, are there some guys on your team that are good, that are talented, but they're struggling. They're having a bad year. They're having a tough go. They're in a tough time. Maybe it's personal. Maybe it's work, whatever it is. And he was much more interested in making that phone call. And by the way, the feedback you would get from the teams that he was called, if he was calling you to tell you did something great, it was probably 5 to 10 minutes. If he was calling you because he believed you were struggling, that probably was an hour call, right? And so to me, it's just a very basic thing. But the secret to winning people and getting them to follow you long term is to celebrate them when they're struggling. Celebrate them in the valleys. You know, they don't need you when they're on the podium. You're just one more slap on the back. So pretty simple, straightforward stuff. So something that really impressed me when I came to Trace3 was this idea of home runs. And I don't know why I didn't get this, and I don't know why I hadn't seen it before, but I'm a huge believer that leaders really need to know you at a fundamental level. And I watched our founder, you know, in some of my first meetings where we'd bring together the major account teams and get them all in a room, and these are successful people that they're very high performing, and they've built teams that are very high performing. But I watched him bring them into a room and say, hey guys, before we get started, can each one of you write the home run you had when you started in this business? So, you know, whether it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you came on board here, what was your home run? And so, you know, these guys would proceed to write out what their home run was. And then, you know, let a little time pass. He said, now can you jump up and write what your home run is today? And by the way, a lot had changed for people that had been there a while. In 5 years, those home runs had changed pretty dramatically. But it's interesting to me how many organizations, right, how many people work day and night together, side by side, sweating it out, risking together, and they don't really know what the other person's even going for. They don't know when someone's going to tap out. They don't know what a real victory is. They don't know what makes someone afraid. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but and easy to do. You just have to want to do it. So I'm a big believer that great leaders play to your strength. This is another one that, you know, I was just saying, corporate America, I've always been a little bit taken back by. It seems like a lot of the companies I've worked for at the end of the year, I would have managers come forward and say, hey, this is the review on so-and-so. She's really great, but here's her developmental plan. And I'd go, well, what's she really great at? And they'd say, well, man, she's unbelievable at this. So what we've done is we've built a plan to focus her away from that and focus her on these things that she's not very good at. And so, that, you know, and then we'll measure her next year on that. It's really smart, right? And so interestingly enough, you know, the conversation hopefully is, well, hey, you know, did we hire her for where she was weak, or did we hire her for where she was strong? And if she was good, can we make her great? And if she was great, could the developmental plan be around where her juice is, and we could actually take her from great to world class? And which one of those, by the way, focusing on weakness versus strength, which one of those is a needle mover for the company? Right? Again, very commonsensical, very straightforward, but common sense is not common, and these things are not practiced very often. So playing to strength is a big, big deal. You know, all of us have a desired hand that we write with. I'm a right-handed guy. If you create a plan, you say, hey, Tyler, I need you to write left-handed, I can do it. But it'll be sloppy, I'll be fatigued, we'll both burn out very quickly. So very simple, great leaders play to people's juice. And lastly, just one that this is close to home with me is great leaders mine for the truth. And, some of you have heard me talk about, you know, I'm just a big believer that honesty is a very lonely word, right? And I think there's a song written like that. And that we really are punished, right, for the lies. You know, I was reading a magazine a while back, and I was in the kind of the wisdom section, and there was a quote by an author named V.S. Nepal. I don't know him. I didn't know of him. I hadn't read any of his books. All I knew was he was a British citizen, I think, living in Trinidad of Indian descent. But interestingly enough, he had this quote, and he said, the only lies we're truly punished for are the ones we tell ourselves. And I think in leadership, right, what I take out of that is, in leadership, a lot of times we just want to hear what we want to hear. We want to hear what we want to hear, and we want to move on because we're busy and we want to do things. But do we really take the time to figure out what's going on? If you'll indulge me in one more strange story, this kid in our neighborhood we call Handsome Jack. He's 10 years old. He happens to live in my basement, and he looks like his mother, thank goodness. Anyhow, just a quick story on Jack. So Jack does not do well in school. He really struggles. In fact, I've tried to teach him a lot of sales technique in the hopes that he will have a life. Because he is just, I mean, he sees a book and his eyes just roll and he's on his, it's over, right? He gets spladled at school a lot, right? So one day I'm with Jack. I had a soft morning. I pick him up from the dentist office. I drive him back to his school. And by the way, his school is one of these, I mean, it's just such a throwback. It looks like my school. It's one of these kind of Frank Lloyd Wright, 1950s, 60s red brick with the weird roofs going every direction. And so I pull up in front of this building and I'm like, hey buddy, have a great day. And he's been murmuring and half crying and cursing under his breath because he hates to go to school. So I drop him off at the front door, and like a good dad, I sit there and try to watch and make sure he gets all the way inside the building. So I watch the front doors close behind him and all is well, and I'm looking at my phone and then I'm looking back and I notice he should have taken a right by now. He should have gone down the hallway that goes towards his classroom, but he hasn't. And so I wait a little while longer and I can just watch this kid kind of disappear in the distance. It's just one of those long hallways where you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. The hallway terminates at a playground and back. And so here I'm watching my 10-year-old kid walk past hallway 1, hallway 2, hallway 3, down the steps and out on the playground. Like, wow, am I raising a felon? Like, who is this kid, right? So I get out of my car and I head around the back of the school, and there he is holding the basketball, and he's kind of stunned that I'm there, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, what are you doing here? And so I say to Jack, well, listen, buddy, let's go back to school. And he explains to me, hey, resource is coming up soon. And I look at my watch, and I'm like, yeah, it's like in 35 minutes. But he's like, yeah, resource comes soon. I'm like, okay, well, listen, bud, get into school. I make sure he gets where he's going. And then I'm like, tonight we're going to talk at the house. So I get home to the house, and I sit him down, and I try to fake like a good dad. And I'm like, hey, bud, let's talk about, what don't you like about school? And he says, hey, my teacher is horrible. I do not like my teacher. She's just she's a breaker. She crushes me all the time. By the way, she knows nothing about computers, and her computer stuff's weird, and I don't like computers either. And so my natural tendency as a dad is to dive on that. I'm like, okay, I know what we're talking about. He just gave me something, and now I'm going to preach. I'm going to sock it to him. School's important. Computers are important. I start to talk about how Disneyland runs and how we get there on a plane, and it's all computerized. It's very important that you learn this. So I started on my spiel, and then luckily, I've been at work, and so I had a little discipline left in me. I might have had even like my sales hat still on. And so I pulled back, and I said, hey, Jack, I understand you don't like your teacher. Makes sense. Some of us didn't like some of our teachers. Yeah, computer class. Some of us don't like computers. Got it. What else? He says, what do you mean, what else? I'm like, what else? What else don't you like about school? He kind of looks at me like, hey, dude, this is when we're done. This is when you become a dumb adult, and you preach at me. This is when I roll my eyes and act disgusted, and then we have this awkward moment. We go good, and we walk away, and nothing happened. And by the way, I mean, I've seen this a million times, but I take the bait. He literally pulls a little bone out of his pocket and throws it down the road, and I just take off like a dog. I'm just, computers, that's what we're talking about, So my point with the story is, I'm sitting there with someone who's saying, hey, I don't like school because I don't like my teacher and I don't like computers. I have to keep a little discipline about me, and I say, Jack, got it. What else? He says, they kept me in at recess last week because they can't find a paper. I turned in the paper, but they're keeping me in as a punishment. Got it, man. That's not right. That doesn't sound good. What else? Well, geez, you got to see the food in the cafeteria. It's horrible. I'm like, makes sense to me, buddy. What else? So I hit him with a couple more what else's, and then I hit pay dirt. He says, yeah, and I'm in 4th grade, and there's this 6th grader that when I go around to this class or the cafeteria, he makes fun of me. He says that I have girly hair. He says I have curly hair like a girl. He calls me Nancy all the time. And I'm like, aha, we're on pay dirt now, right? So I keep my discipline. I hit him with a couple more what else's. But my point is, I ended up having one of the best interactions that I've ever had with my kid because I took the time to mine for it. And my point is, in business is just personal relationships. And we've all been taught to front each other, right? To essentially give an answer that people will go with so that we can just be efficient and move on. Like my boy, he just wants to throw that hey, Dad, fetch, go get it, right? And then we'll end this thing and we're out of here. But we had a great interaction because we were able to talk about what was really eating him. And this seems super basic, but I see it in business every day. We sell, we politic, we push against false concerns. We're not on pay dirt. You've got a mind for it. So a couple last quick thoughts. Leaders set the tone. This is just, again, seems super straightforward, but we all really should be who we want to seem, right? We really should try to set a tone for people. An old boss of mine used to say, plan the work, work the plan. I'm, again, a huge believer, as the old saying, if you don't have a plan, by default, you're part of someone else's plan. IT has to have not only a plan, it has to have the plan, because technology is the business moving forward. It's interesting. I don't know if DirecTV's here. You guys have heard them speak in the past if you've attended this conference. But one of the things that they do is they have an incredible program that rewards people for honesty and risk. So if you get a chance, there's a young executive, very bright, named Russell Bacon. I don't know if Russell's here, but pull him aside and pick his brain. It's really, by the way, he's got a really smart British accent. Last bullet on great leaders, and this is one that I take very, very seriously, is that leaders welcome the weight of the calling, right? There's a quote that I love that basically is, pressure is a privilege. And I always try to think about that when I'm under a lot of pressure. It's like, wait a minute, why am I feeling all this stress? Do I want more stress? Do I want to take more on? If we talk about, hey, you're not only being thrust into prominence in your business and not only being pushed to the executive table, but you might be pushed to the big chair because all eyes are on, everybody's looking for the answer, and the answer lies in technology. That's a lot of pressure, right? And you really have to want that. And you think about great athletes, right? I mean, they practice and practice and practice so that they can be comfortable in times that are uncomfortable, to make that last shot, to make that big putt when all eyes are on them, to be in the huddle and say, hey, call my number, I'm ready, this is what I've worked for. I believe that is the state of technology in every business, is we need to welcome the pressure. We need to say, this is what we've prepared for all of our lives, the time is now for us to take it and run. I was gonna do some cute stuff with football, but we've got a guy here who's forgotten more than I know, so I'm gonna leave it. The only thing I wanted to say is, I think really interesting matchup coming up, and there were a couple guys that are in this audience, and I just want to make a quick comment. Does anybody remember how, by the fourth game of the season, what the record was for the Patriots? 2-2, right? 4 games in there, 500. Does anybody remember? So that's our Northeastern team. On the Northwest side, anybody remember what their record was 6 games in? 3-3. So you got 2 500 teams, right, out of the gate that are somehow playing for the Super Bowl. Does anybody know where both teams ended up as far as overall record? 12-4, right? It's pretty impressive. I mean, think about the runs that were there. One of the interesting things that I got just recently via email was from Dara Simpson, who's one of our great sales reps. And she sent me a piece on the Seahawks, and I would ask all of you guys, hit the Wall Street Journal if you haven't seen this thing. It's just WSJ.com. But it basically talks about the Seahawks believe their edge, the thing that has pulled their season into what it is their ability to be honest with each other, and they attribute it all to organizational health and facilitating honesty. So I've talked a lot about it. In closing, there's some of you have heard me talk about this term just a little bit. We're in Vegas, and there's a lot of magic shows. I've never really been excited about magic shows. I don't really get it, but I know a lot of people have. But I did read an interesting book a while back on Harry Houdini, and it was about pressure and how to handle pressure. And then a while later, I read a book by a guy that cited Houdini. And one of the things that he said towards the end of Houdini's life, he tells a story of a biographer that was really pursuing Houdini. And this biographer was really pushing him, saying, hey, listen, you're the greatest artist of our time. You've done these amazing tricks. You've wowed audiences, the worldwide. And you really shouldn't take these tricks to the grave with you, right? You should really share what you've done, right, so that we know. And Houdini's comment back to this guy was, hey, I can show you 80% of what I do. Not that he did, but he said, hey, 80% of what I do, I can show you via sleight of hand, misdirection, smoke, mirrors. I can show you how I create an illusion that looks magical to people, and I can do that. The other 20%, I don't know how it works, right? I just know that when I do certain things, it looks a certain way, and that he calls real magic. So my closing thought for you all is you've attended a lot of offsites, right? This isn't your first roundup in Vegas. You've been here a lot, different groups, different meetings. Think back on the meetings that have really been game changers for you, that have really been meaningful, and what you did during those meetings to make them special. My ask of all of us is, I believe if you will be open and vulnerable and be aggressive in reaching out and getting to know other people, and if you'll share, hey, this is what I'm trying to do in my business, this is what I'm afraid of, this is my home run, if you'll really be authentic and do that with 2 or 3 people, I believe you will experience real magic. And when I get this idea of pressure as a privilege, I just want you to know we're in this fight together. We talk about the Chief Possibilities Officer and this idea of, hey, how do we know what's possible? How do we know what to say yes and say no to, right? We have got your back. We are ready to answer those questions with you. Thank you. God bless you. Appreciate your time.